The amazing thing is that Sudan had a part in October 7th. Another one is called Put, which today is Libya, North Africa. Libya also was behind October 7th. Asia Minor, Turkey. Turkey also had a big part in October 7th in funding it. And the other one he mentions is Paras, which is Iran, which is the key of all this. The Iranian Revolution actually moved us into Bible prophecy because now Iran is the arch enemy of Israel. All these nations that Ezekiel actually mentions tells us we are aligning up specifically with Bible prophecy. It is racing forward.
And the four horsemen of the apocalypse depicted in the book of Revelation, you speak about the colors of the apocalypse.
The first horse, it says, was white, which linked to conquest. The second is red, linked to war. The third one is black, which represents famine. And the last one, the fourth one, is green or pale green, which represents death. The amazing thing is, the colors of the apocalypse have actually been manifesting in our world as never before, because the flag of Palestine is white for the white horse, red for the red horse, black for the black horse, and green for the green horse, the colors of the apocalypse.
Now let's talk about the dragon.
And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. Revelation 12:4.
The Bible speaks about this whole war as a dragon representing the enemy attacking a woman representing Israel.
But you also have a child. It strikes me that's the Messiah.
It's absolutely. It says a child who then is going to rule the world and who is caught up in heaven. So it clearly is Messiah. The dragon in the vision wants to destroy that child. When the dragon cannot destroy the child, the dragon turns his wrath against the woman.
To me, this evokes the Garden of Eden. Satan cannot take any direct revenge on God. God is stronger than Satan. So Satan targets the beloved creation of God, namely man.
Yes, as God's purposes were focused through Israel, so the enemy's hatred is focused on the same thing. It's exactly what we expect.
The dragon, you say, is the original anti-Semite.
Yes.
The dragon is conducting through anti-Semitism his war against God himself.
Yes.
The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman, to sweep her away with a flood. Revelation 12:15.
Hamas, they don't call it October 7th. They call it Operation Tufan. Tufan means the flood. What we witnessed that day, that was the dragon's flood.
The name Hamas has a biblical significance.
Yeah, Hamas is a strange word. It's an Arabic word. At the same moment, it's an ancient Hebrew word. In Arabic, it's an acronym for the Islamic resistance movement. Also in Arabic, it means fervor, zeal, passion. In ancient Hebrew, Hamas means evil, violence, and destruction. And it actually appears in the Bible. You'll have a scripture that says, Lord, save me from the men of Hamas. Hamas dwells in the dark places of the earth. Rid Hamas from the land.
And the earth was filled with violence. Genesis 6:11.
So it's all again part of an ancient mystery.
October 7th, the people doing the atrocities filmed the atrocities, and not only that, but broadcast them, which is to say that they were proud of them and they met with a joyous reception. Even the Nazis, who did horrible things, tried to hide them. The death camps, for example, are by and large not in Germany, they're in occupied Poland.
The Nazis were coming up in a, quote, Christian culture, so they knew they would be condemned. This is going to sound kind of crazy, but it's true. Adolf Hitler had a part in October 7th.
How so?
The War of the Dragon is over ages, and so he raises up one vessel, they go down, take the next one next. It's like a relay race, and so we'd expect to see some kind of passing of the torch. There was a guy named the Mufti of Jerusalem, hated the Jewish people.
Unrest in Palestine. Suspecting that the Higher Committee had incited Arab leaders to start a holy war against the British government, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, head of the Muslim Supreme Council, was deprived of office.
He fled and he ended up in Germany. He meets with Adolf Hitler. He wants Hitler to bring the Holocaust to the Middle East. And Hitler says he will, and when the time is right. After the war, the Mufti is going to be put on trial at Nuremberg, but he escapes, goes to Egypt. He's hailed as a hero. He becomes the one who's known as the father of Palestinian nationalism. Here you have a direct link from Berlin to Gaza. He finds an Egyptian teenager, takes him under his wing, mentors him, trains him, disciples him. The Egyptian teenager's name is Yasser Arafat. Yasser Arafat becomes the leader of the Palestinian movement. Hitler supported and sponsored and mentored the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood gave birth to Hamas.
So this is Adolf Hitler's book, translated to Arabic, Mein Kampf. This book was found just a few days ago in northern Gaza in a children's living room. It's the book that led to the Holocaust and the book that led to World War II.
Right now in Israel, you have the most important structure in Jerusalem, in Israel, perhaps in the world, and that is the Temple Mount. At the very top of the Temple Mount sits a mosque, a great conquest by the dragon.
It's really the ground zero of end-time prophecy. It's called the Temple Mount for the reason that the temple is to be rebuilt there. That mountain shall be lifted up in the end times. All nations will come to it. Messiah will rule from that mountain. The kingdom of God is linked to that mountain. So what is the enemy going to do? In the prophets, the enemy says, I will sit on that mountain.
This then is the real colonialism. Islam has colonized and occupied the holiest site in Judaism and Christianity.
That temple represented the throne of God on earth. So he's going to try to take the throne. And you have the Eastern Gate. The Bible links the Eastern Gate to Messiah coming. But what happened with the Eastern Gate of the Temple Mount? The Muslims blocked it up so nobody could come through. Like, we're going to stop the purpose of God. Behind October 7th was actually the Temple Mount.
What is that connection?
Months before October 7th, there was an intention that there were Jewish worshipers who wanted to go on the Mount and celebrate Passover on the mountain, which is where you're supposed to celebrate it, with a lamb. All hell broke loose. After October 7th, Hamas issued a statement. They said it was because you, Israel, desecrated our holy place. And in one of those things, it said, because of the red heifers.
So the Bible speaks about, in times of Moses and Aaron, red heifers being part of the ritualistic sacrifice. Red heifers in the temple would be a pretty telltale sign of the last days.
Yeah, the red heifers. They haven't existed, but all of a sudden they found about 5 of them.
These are the red heifers that landed at Israel's Ben Gurion Airport. Rabbis believe the ashes of a red heifer are necessary for purifying priests to serve in a future temple.
The dragon went crazy because he knows what this means. And the answer was October 7th. So we are watching again end-time prophecy. The Bible speaks of an end-time state, a one-world form of a culture or civilization that is going to be anti-Christian and anti-Jewish, anti-Israel. And the Bible also speaks of a figure called the Antichrist or the beast.
And you're saying that Christ came into the world 2,000 years ago. The Antichrist is yet to come.
The spirit of the Antichrist comes first and leads to his coming. So already in the world, you can see the spirit of this, the hatred for the Jewish people. People will be without natural affection, it says in the Bible. Well, it's moving from, say, natural to unnatural. And so it's a war against the ways of God, but also the creation of God. A war against manhood, against womanhood, against marriage, against family, against life, against childhood, against reality. And we are watching all of it come at the same time.
We've been talking about the Bible as an interpretive key to world events. But how do we know we can trust the Bible as a reliable source of truth? Eric Metaxas is a scholar and commentator who has studied the topic of biblical archaeology and written a book about it, Is Atheism Dead?
Eric, for centuries, the Bible was seen by many people as something that you took on faith. But particularly for skeptics, the characters of the Bible were seen as mythic figures, maybe similar to the figures of Greek mythology.
But it's only really since the Enlightenment that this idea has come into being that, oh yeah, King David, he's a mythical king like King Arthur. In the last century and a half, that idea began to unravel. Just the archaeological evidence for the Bible as a historical document has become genuinely overwhelming. There's example after example after example. It only moves in one direction. It never happens that somebody discovers something. From archaeology, we see that the Bible is wrong. Just the opposite.
When you go back to the Old Testament, we're talking about 1,000, 1,200 years before Christ. One would expect that a lot of that has been lost in the mist of time. For example, the ancient enemies of Israel.
Right.
You have the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Moabites. I mean, we've heard of the Assyrians, we've heard of the Babylonians, but whoever heard of the Hittites?
No one believed the Hittites existed. But then evidence came out more and more and more. And over many decades, they pieced it all together and they thought, oh, the Hittite Empire.
Let's talk about some of the remarkable findings that validate the New Testament. Pontius Pilate is a figure who does not appear in any historical document outside of the Bible. He was in the Bible, but he was only in the Bible. And then people start digging in Caesarea in northern Israel.
Here in 1961, archaeologists discovered proof of Pilate's existence.
You wouldn't really sort of think that at this spot, under this wooden stack, this inscription was found, Latin inscription mentioning Pontius Pilate. But this was one of those pivotal moments which changes everything, because suddenly Pontius Pilate comes out of this written inscription. It's not just this figure in the Gospels.
Now, anybody who took the Bible seriously was not shocked, but a lot of people who don't take the Bible seriously, they were shocked. They were making a water park, so they're excavating, and then they come upon a bunch of these stone ossuaries. One of them was particularly ornate, and it was the tradition of the first century to put the bones of the deceased in an ossuary. And they look at it inside, they examine the bones of about a 60-year-old man, and the name on it, Caiaphas, the high priest, dated exactly to the time Caiaphas would have lived. Caiaphas is in the New Testament, and now we have his bones, not just the ossuary, but the bones themselves. It doesn't end.
Isn't it ironic that as the world has become more and more secular, do you think that it's not accidental that God has chosen now to speak back through the stones?
If we're approaching, the end of time, God will reveal himself more and more dramatically. The evidence has piled up to a point that I think the only way not to deal with it is to look away. They discovered the home of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph in Nazareth. Almost no one knows that. Practically the greatest thing you could discover, the childhood home of Jesus. And then, because of the milieu in which you move as an archaeologist, you say, well, this is embarrassing. Can I talk about it in a way that sort of buries the lead? And that is exactly what happened. The whole excavation really started in 1880 when some French nuns said, we want to go to Nazareth, the home of Jesus, and we want to build a convent. They start digging to build a convent. They find this ancient cistern and they realize, oh, there's something here. So this is the headline, that some women were doing some archaeology, not that these women who were nuns, who gave their whole lives over to serving Jesus, had discovered the home of Jesus, but it was about the fact that they were women. Those are the times in which we live.
Biblical history is based on the idea that history has a plot.
Right.
There's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end.
Right.
One of the things that Kahn says is that as the plot reaches its climax, God and the devil would begin to make themselves more manifest.
It makes sense that evil would become more palpably explicitly evil. We're seeing that now. If evidence is piling up more and more for the existence of God, for the historicity of the Bible, if you are adamantly against it, you have to rail against it more loudly or violently. That's part of what I think this grand narrative is, which is the exposure of evil. People have nowhere to hide, and so the masks are coming off.
I wanted to see these discoveries of biblical archaeology firsthand. I started in the place where Israel itself started, Shiloh, in the region of Judea and Samaria. Some call it the West Bank. It's where the ancient Israelites came when they entered the Promised Land. Eliana Passenton is the international director of the Regional Council for Judea and Samaria. And you live up at the top of the hill, and you can see from the river to the sea.
I wake up in the morning, first thing, and I can see Jordan. So that's the river. And in the afternoon, when the sun is setting, I have a beautiful view of the Mediterranean. From the river to the sea is the entire state of Israel. Shiloh is Israel's first capital city before Jerusalem.
So the ancient Israelites crossed the desert and they came to the Promised Land, but they didn't go to Jerusalem.
Joshua brings the children of Israel to Shiloh, establishes the first capital city, and this is where the tabernacle stands for 369 years. And we found ancient remnants of pottery everywhere, even in our backyard, from the time of the tabernacle.
Eliana, what brings Shiloh to an end?
We read the book of Samuel that Eli the high priest is here waiting. The children of Israel go to the battlefield and they fight the Philistines. The messenger comes running from the battlefield and he gives the bad news that we lost the battle, his sons were killed, and the enemy took the golden holy Ark of the Covenant. Eli hears this terrible news, falls down, breaks his neck, and dies. We uncover that there was a huge fire here exactly at that time. We even have raisins that were burnt to a crisp in his fire. It's one of the sites in Israel that the story of the Bible and the archaeological finds are hand in hand. And I'm sure, Dinesh, that you can feel what I feel. It's a special feeling.
And it's the feeling really of a massive convergence of a biblical truth now supported and confirmed by archaeological discovery.
That's right.
You mentioned that the highway right here, Highway 60, is the highway of the patriarchs. What do you mean by that?
There's one artery of life in ancient times. I'm going to read this in Hebrew and then I'll translate. ויאמרו הנה חג השם בשילה מימים ימימה אשר מצפונה לבית אל. And there was the festival of the Lord from year to year in Shiloh, which is north of Beit El, east of the highway that goes from Beit El to Shechem, and on the south of Livonah. Right here in Hebrew, it says highway, and it's the main artery of life in ancient times, and it's the main artery of life today.
And this is the land you're saying that Abraham and Joseph walked.
And Jacob, right here.
Shiloh invokes the very beginning of the story of Israel, but in some ways it is also connected with the end times. Jonathan Cahn spoke of red heifers. We found the very same red heifers in Shiloh. Larry Borntrager is a ranch hand from America looking after the red heifers.
Larry, in the Bible, it talks about the temple being built again in the end times.
Yes.
And for the temple to be built again, there would need to be services or rites performed in the temple.
They would need to have the waters of purification, which according to Numbers 19 would be the ashes of a red heifer mixed in with living water, sprinkled on the people.
So this practice goes back to the time of Moses.
Yes. 30 years ago, a farmer thought maybe someday Israel might need a red heifer. Some years ago, some of the rabbis were looking for a red heifer in Israel. They couldn't find any. So they advertised outside. This farmer said yes, he thinks he has some.
Where was that?
In Texas.
How'd they get here?
They came over by plane.
Sometimes when people talk about Bible prophecy, they speak in very general and abstract terms. But here you have a group of rabbis and Jews who are anticipating the reconstruction of a temple and are making actual preparations for doing rites and services in it.
That's the whole idea.
Shiloh is a place of ancient biblical significance, and so it seems to be not inappropriate that these heifers are back in Shiloh.
Yes.
I went to a site in Jerusalem that is home to perhaps the greatest discovery in biblical archaeology in the 21st century.
Welcome to the city of David. Thank you very much. It's exciting. Let's take a look. All right, let's take a look. It's a very active excavation. This is, as we speak, uncovering Jerusalem's history and heritage right before our eyes.
Zev Ornstein is the Director of International Affairs for the City of David Foundation.
What period is this now?
So this is the Hellenistic period. So a little bit around the Second Temple, a little bit before. It's difficult work. You have to be gentle but also tough.
Now, David was the greatest of the kings of the Hebrew scriptures. How was his palace? How did you discover it?
The year is 2005. Our visitor center is directly above our heads. All of this is underground. One morning, Dr. Eilat Mazar, world-renowned archaeologist, she comes into our offices and says to us, you need to move your visitor center. Beneath your feet, you will find the palace of King David. Now, if you have a city on a hill, what part of the hill would you expect to find the palace? The top of the hill. She says, this is the top of the city of David. This is where you'll find the palace. I said, Dr. Mazar, with all due respect, what else do you have to support your theory? She shows us a royal Phoenician capital. And she says that this royal Phoenician capital, found some 60 years ago on the slope that we're standing atop right now, proves that where we're standing is in fact the location of King David's palace. And she opens up the Bible to 2 Samuel chapter 5, which recounts the story of how David conquers Jerusalem and makes it his capital. He reaches out to his neighbors in the north, the Phoenicians. And it says, King Hiram of Tyre sent envoys to David with cedar logs, carpenters, and stonemasons. And they built a palace for David. Why do we find a royal Phoenician capital here in the city of David? Because it was the Phoenicians who built David's palace. They begin to dig, and they find to the north, to the east, walls up to 20 feet thick. Dr. Mazar finds at the base of the walls pottery and other organic material, which she dates to 3,000 years ago, to the time of David. This was the royal government center of the Davidic dynasty. This was the original Capitol Hill. There's a whole group of scholars known as the Copenhagen School. And they would have said to you, prove to us, not using the Bible, that there was a historic David some 3,000 years ago. Prior to 1993, you could not do it. There was an excavation in Israel's north, in a place called Tel Dan, where a large stone inscription is unearthed, dating to about 100 years or so after the time of David. And this inscription is attributed to a man named King Hazael of Aram. Aram is modern-day Syria, and this King Hazael is also mentioned in the Bible in 2 Kings. And this king, the inscription tells us, was in a good mood. Why? Because it says he had won a major military victory over a king from the house of David. And if there's a house of David, what does that mean?
There was a King David.
There was a David.
In a Davidic line.
That's right. And so today, virtually everyone agrees there was a historic David. A person relates to the Bible. For many, it's a book of faith. You believe or you don't believe. Yet many people today say, I don't just want to believe. I also want to know, are the people who marched through the pages of the Bible, were they real people? And the discoveries being made here in the city of David are showing that Jerusalem's biblical heritage is not simply a matter of faith, but a matter of fact. It's real. Where we're standing over here, a small seal was unearthed. And the name on the seal in ancient Hebrew writing, dating back some 2,400 years, was Nathan Melech, servant of the king. If you open up 2 Kings 23:11, you find that this Nathan Melech was a royal steward to King Josiah. Direct descendant of King David, his royal chamberlain was somewhere in this area over here. The Pilgrimage Road has been called the most significant archaeological discovery of the last 100 years. This is what I call the biblical superhighway. Anywhere that you wanted to go in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, this was the road that would take you there. From the Pool of Siloam, at the southern end of the city of David, all the way up along the half-mile pilgrimage journey up to the temple on the Temple Mount. And what you would have along the sides of the pilgrimage road, shops, stalls.
And the Pool of Siloam was a purification spot.
Before you can go up to the temple, you have to cleanse yourself. Pool of Siloam in the city of David was perhaps the largest ritual bath anywhere in the world.
With regard to Jesus, what are the chances that he walked this very road?
Conservatively speaking, 100%. He was in Jerusalem, and he was Jewish. He would have gone with all the Jews at that time to cleanse at the Pool of Siloam. He would have then walked up the flagstones that we're standing on right now of the pilgrimage road, running through the city of David, coming out at the temple on the Temple Mount. If you give me your hand, you can see over here that is ash from the fires that destroyed Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. The year 70, when the Romans burned Jerusalem to the ground. This coin, it goes back 66 to 70 CE, during the period known as the Great Jewish Revolt. Jewish people are fighting for their freedom, fighting against the Roman occupation of Jerusalem. At that time, the coins had no monetary value. So what's the point of all this? These coins, which say in ancient Hebrew writing, for the freedom of Zion, represent a hope, a wish, a dream, and a prayer that one day their descendants would return to Jerusalem as sovereign. It took 2,000 years, but there is a free Jerusalem today, the capital of the state of Israel.
And it is worth noting that Israel was invaded by the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Romans, but the Jews are still here.
The people who walked on this road 2,000 years ago, it's their descendants who will walk on it once again.
One of the most remarkable things to me about all this is that there does seem to be, in the face of facts, a spirit of denialism.
The story that they've been telling for the last series of decades is that Israel is a colonial project, that the Jewish people have no history, no heritage in this land in general, and certainly not in Jerusalem in particular. The problem with that is the city of David. We are what you could call an inconvenient truth.
North of Jerusalem is the ancient city of Megiddo, layered with centuries of war, worship, and warning. This was the stage for some of history's earliest recorded battles. Recent discoveries of Egyptian pottery at this site confirm an epic battle documented in 2 Kings and Chronicles between King Josiah and an Egyptian pharaoh. I spoke with Israeli archaeologist Ido Keenan.
Ido, how long have you been in the field of archaeology?
For about the last 40 years.
You do your work with the Bible, which you call your compass in one hand, and then the tools of archaeology in the other.
So true. The compass, the scriptures, that helps me understand what I'm looking for.
And are you aware of any significant archaeological finding that contradicts what you are holding in your hand, namely the Bible?
No.
What is the significance of this place, Megiddo?
There were about 37 battles that took place here, starting from Thothmes III, 2,500 years BC, and 1973, over here, there is an Israeli air base, and it was attacked during that time by Assyria.
What you're saying is that this place has been the center of constant battles.
I don't say it. It's the scriptures. This place, it says in Revelations, this is where the last battle will take place.
Megiddo is the root of the term Armageddon, a term used in the context of the last days.
You don't believe that the final and apocalyptic clash between good and evil is purely metaphorical. You believe that there will be an actual confrontation and it will in some way involve Megiddo.
Every word you just said, that it's exactly it.
In the hills of Galilee lies Nazareth, the hometown of Jesus. Today, Nazareth is a vibrant city with a predominantly Muslim population, yet it remains a key Christian pilgrimage destination.
This is the place of the Annunciation, where Mary was given the announcement that she is pregnant. We see here the remainings of Nazareth going back 2,000 years ago. People have an idea that Nazareth was a big city. No. Remember what the scriptures tell us. What good can come out of Nazareth? Well, why do they say that? Nazareth was a small village of maybe 100 to 200 people. It was small.
And today in Nazareth, it looks like there's been a demographic shift.
60 years ago, okay? About 70% Christian Arabs, mainly from the Eastern churches, right? And 30% Muslims. Today is just the opposite.
In the place where Jesus was raised, today, 70% Muslim.
Yes.
We continue further north to the Sea of Galilee. Along its shore lies the ruins of Capernaum, once a humble fishing village, now a silent witness to history. It was here that Jesus called fishermen like Peter, Andrew, James, and John to follow him. You know, Mark chapter 1, verse 21, Jesus came to Capernaum, and on the Sabbath he went to the synagogue where he taught. Is this where he taught?
This is where he taught. But the synagogue we are standing in now is from a later period, from 400 years later.
So this is Jesus saying, "You, Capernaum, will you be exalted to heaven? You will be brought down to Hades." Jesus is predicting that this place will go down and will not come back up again.
Exactly. Every verse, every sentence, every chapter are there to be fulfilled. And it took 600 years till this place was leveled down.
Ultimately, Jesus' prophecy came true. There's nothing here in Capernaum now except for the remnants.
Exactly.
And right next door to us are the ruins of a dwelling. The dwelling is sometimes described as Peter's house, which is not exactly correct. Whose house is it?
It's St. Peter's mother-in-law house. And Mark, it says, and Jesus came to Capernaum, to St. Peter's mother-in-law house as she was sick. She was in bed, and he healed her.
Biblical archaeology is confirmation of the ancient presence of the Jews in Israel. Far from being colonizers, the Jews are the original and indigenous inhabitants of the region. Moreover, the Jews of today are the descendants of the ancient Israelites, the Jews of the Bible. Today's Jews speak the same language, eat the same food, perform the same rites and rituals, and worship the same God. Biblical archaeology also shows that the Hebrew and Christian scriptures are corroborated in the seals and the stones. As Zev Ornstein said, it's not simply a matter of faith, it's also a matter of fact. Jonathan Cahn's view of the dragon's prophecy is supported by history. But what are the moral and practical implications?
Israel has dropped more bombs in the last 10 days than we dropped in a whole year in Afghanistan.
There's clearly growing consensus in the Council that it must do more to hold Israel accountable.
They're shooting and killing civilians at humanitarian aid hubs, dozens of them on a daily basis. Literal children are getting shot in the face. It's a genocide. It's a genocide.
When regimes start wars, they are responsible for the fate of their own children. I mean, if I come and do a home invasion on you, right, and threaten your children, and you strike back, and then I go grab my own kids and stick them in front of me and say, don't shoot, because I'm holding my own kids. The truth of it is, I am putting my kids in jeopardy, not you. The controversial issue of civilian casualties was addressed by Mossab Hassan Youssef, who is the son of one of the founders of Hamas. His father has publicly called for his death.
Israel did everything within their ability to minimize the civilian casualty in Gaza. While Hamas did everything in their ability to maximize the civilian casualty.
The speaker will be heard.
Hamas did everything within their ability to maximize the civilian casualty for political and financial gain, for global sympathy, and they succeeded of fooling so many people.
Hamas confesses its desire to hurt its own people.
إن دماء الأطفال والنساء والشيوخ لا أقول تستصرخكم، بل نحن الذين نحتاج هذه الدماء لكي توقظ فينا روح الثورة.
If Israel wanted to get rid of Gaza, it would a long time ago. Israel has the power to erase Gaza if it wants to. It didn't do that because we're trying to eliminate Hamas bases without hurting as many people as we can. They stole from me innocence, time, love. There's a limit to what they can steal. I think that I'm not allowed to stop because there's so many stories that we'll never hear. And those people, they actually knew what the value of life is. They actually enjoyed life. So I think it's like I owe them to keep dancing.
All these people.
Yes.
There's no doubt that the civilian carnage in Gaza remains a moral horror. Even if Israel is justified in its actions, who can justify the deaths of women and children? For me, the civilian deaths on both sides represent victories on the part of the dragon, whose moral currency is death itself. In her 1972 book, My Life, Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir said, "We can forgive the Arabs for killing our children, but we can never forgive them for forcing us to kill their children." This captures the moral ambiguity of retaliation, and what compounds the tragedy is that it offers no immediate solution. But is there a wider solution to the conflict itself? For the Israeli perspective, I turn to the Prime Minister of Israel. Prime Minister Netanyahu, let me begin by asking you about October 7th.
Well, I heard about it at 6:29, which is more or less the moment that the attack crossed our lines. I was in my home, got dressed, went to our military headquarters in Tel Aviv, and said, "This is not another round with Hamas terrorists. This is a war." I realized it wasn't only a war against Hamas, it's a war against the Iran axis, and we will have to take it on. And I said and promised that we would change the Middle East, ridding it of the Iran axis, ridding it of Iran's proxies, but also ridding it of Iran's threat to annihilate Israel and threaten the West with nuclear weapons.
It seems that you recognized immediately that it posed some serious problems for the idea of the two-state solution.
Hamas had a state, a de facto state. It used it not to promote peace, but to try to annihilate Israel. They pay terrorists for murdering Jews. The more Jews they murder, the more they get paid. The idea that we should give the Palestinians who seek our destruction a base for which to execute our destruction was folly. A lot of leaders in the West still cling to this absurd notion that this conflict between us and the Palestinians is about the absence of a Palestinian state. It never was. The goal was never to create a Palestinian state for peace, but to destroy and annihilate the one and only Jewish state.
The critics will say that Israel has killed far more civilians in retaliation for October 7th than were killed on October 7th.
Well, I think you killed a lot more Germans than Americans were killed in World War II. That's an understatement. And the same is true of Japan. Japan attacked you in a surprise attack in Pearl Harbor, and they killed, I don't know, a few thousand Americans.
I'd like to raise with you this amazing accusation that Israel is somehow a colonial power.
This has been our land for 3,500 years, since Abraham came here, and it was populated by the Jewish people, by the people of the Bible. That's when the Bible was written. It wasn't written in Tibet. It was written here by people that lived here. Our identity was forged here. Our faith, our very being. We were often conquered by the Babylonians, the Seleucid Greeks, the Romans, and then by the Byzantines, and finally by the Arabs. It's not we who colonized the area from the Arabs, it's the Arabs who colonized the area from the Jews. Other travelers, Brits, Americans, French, came here in the 19th century. They said, basically, when will the Jews come back and bring this land back to life? And we did. And the Palestinians joined us from neighboring lands. And we never said you have to go out. We welcomed them. But now what they're saying is, this is not your land. It was never your land. We came back to a land that was largely barren and empty, and we brought it back to life, and we're going to keep it.
I saw a video of you walking the pilgrimage road. Say a word about the role of biblical archaeology in affirming the presence of the Jews going back not just to the time of Christ, but going back 2,000 years before that.
First of all, look at Christ himself. He wasn't a Palestinian teacher, he was a Jewish teacher with a Jewish name, Yeshua. His father was Yosef, Joseph. These are all Hebrew names. And where did Jesus turn the tables on the money changers? Where? In Nepal? Perhaps in Singapore? Of course not. It was in the Jewish temple.
In a recent exchange between Tucker Carlson and Senator Ted Cruz, Tucker Carlson said, "Are you saying that the Jews in Israel under Netanyahu are the descendants of the ancient Israelites who are described in the Bible?"
Of course, there's no question about it. The Jews spread from this land to various parts of Europe, to the Middle East and elsewhere. But we never forgot this land. We said next year in Jerusalem, next year in Jerusalem. My great-grandfather came here in the 19th century. Most of the Palestinians who are alive today came after him. So that's what our history has been. On the one hand, regaining our ancient ancestral homeland. On the other, developing a state that becomes a juggernaut of technology and development. We're Silicon Valley in the Middle East, a democratic society in the face of enormous attacks of countries that want to annihilate us every day. Who is Tucker Carlson defending you? These are people who chant death to America. They're after you. They want to destroy Western civilization. They want to destroy everything that America stands for. They say Israel is a small Satan. The big Satan is America. The only place where Christians are safe in the Middle East is in Israel. Not tolerated, welcomed. They participate in our society. We take care of the holy places, which are destroyed everywhere else. Churches blown up throughout the Middle East. So if Tucker Carlson is asking you that, then he has no idea, not of Jewish history, but of history. Who are these so-called defenders of MAGA defending? They're defending the worst enemies on the planet against America. They're not MAGA. The people who speak of MAGA, they love America, and they love America's values, and they don't identify with the worst enemies that America is facing today in the world. President Donald J. Trump, the greatest friend that Israel has ever had, he understands that we're fighting a common enemy. Iran wants to destroy you. We stand in their way. I'm very proud of the fact that Israel is the front line of this battle of civilization against the barbarism that threatens all free societies.
How should we as Americans respond to the situation? I spoke to Eric Stakelbeck on his stage at the TBN studios in Dallas. He's a journalist and TV host who's been covering terrorism in the Middle East for decades. When I think about how countries have gotten their land, one, they were there first. The second is by some sort of treaty or negotiation, and the third is by conquest. Israel succeeds on all three.
God clearly in the Bible promised the land to Abraham and his ancestors forever. So we have the biblical divine legitimacy. But then in 1947-48, as the UN is coming up with this partition plan.
And finally, they came out with a plan to partition Palestine.
Israel right now is the size of the state of New Jersey. The UN wanted to give Israel an even smaller chunk of land than that, and Israel said, okay, we'll do it.
The Middle Eastern Arabic nations were in violent opposition, and when Israel was voted a membership, they walked out in a body.
Arabs rejected it, invaded Israel simultaneously. Israel, against all odds, prevailed.
In the year of independence, fighting was fierce in the Negev desert area. Here, Israeli troops routed the Arabs and took hundreds of prisoners.
And that takes us to 1967. Israel, on the cusp of being invaded by Syria, by Egypt, by Jordan. Israel strikes first.
And that victory is a swift, smashing, and total one. As crack Air Force, infantry, artillery, and tank corps combine to sweep across the Sinai Peninsula to the Suez Canal, east into Jordan, north into Syria.
Israel ends the 1967 war in possession of the Golan Heights, in possession of Gaza, Judea, and Samaria, and even the Sinai Peninsula before they gave it back to Egypt. So Israel checks all the boxes of legitimacy for a nation state.
Isn't it interesting that in this highly significant piece of real estate, the forces of Islam are sitting atop the holiest site of both Judaism and Christianity?
Jerusalem is never mentioned in the Quran, not even once. It's mentioned hundreds of times in the Bible in both the Old Testament and the New. The dome and the mosque were planted there in the 7th century as victory arches. This was the conquest of Jerusalem, the holy city. Even Muhammad, at first, when Islam started, they faced not Mecca, he and his followers, they faced Jerusalem during their daily prayers. They knew the significance of conquering Jerusalem. This has been a pattern in Islamic conquest throughout the centuries. They build victory arches.
What do you make, Eric, of anti-Semitism? It seems to be a cousin of racism. And yet, it's different. In racism, there's an effort by a group of people to say, I'm up here and you're down there. You're inferior to me. But that's hard to say about the Jews because they are far and away the most successful tribe in world history. So anti-Semitism is not simply a looking down on the Jews, but in some weird way, it's a looking up to the Jews.
It's the world's oldest hatred, certainly demonic, a spiritual driver to it, but much of it is based on envy. People have asked, why the Jews? The devil hates the Jewish people because they represent the existence of God. You can't explain the existence and the rebirth of Israel without bringing God into the picture. Where else in human history have we seen a people, after 2,000 years of disbursement, they return to that homeland? They revive the Hebrew language and its irregular use for the first time in 2,500 years.
And you're saying it has to be a miracle?
It's a miracle.
And the dragon's response?
On the first night of Passover, another suicide bomber has killed 15 people, injured 100 others. All of these people were civilians, and there is no other reason than terror.
3 women killed and more than 40 wounded when a bomb exploded in a crowded outdoor cafe in central Tel Aviv.
15 killed and 130 wounded in Jerusalem today when a suicide bomber detonated in a crowded pizzeria.
It seems like in our time, radical Islam has been the primary transmitter of terrorism.
It's been said that not all Muslims are terrorists, but all terrorism in the modern age seems to be committed by Muslims. We're seeing a great resurgence of radical Islam. I really think it began in 1979.
Chaotic celebrations erupted in Tehran when the news broke the Shah had gone. The Shah is defeated. Khomeini has won.
Iran was a friend of Israel, a friend of the United States and the West. That all changed in 1979. That was really the watershed moment for modern day terror, because terrorists around the world, whether they were Sunni, Shia, They saw what the Ayatollah did in Iran. It inspired jihadis around the world. They said, if they can do it, perhaps we can too. The dream of jihadis everywhere is to have a nation state, not just be a ragtag bunch running back and forth between caves. Iran is the crown jewel of jihadi government. We have the Taliban back in Afghanistan. We have Syria run by al-Qaeda-linked jihadis who overthrew Bashar al-Assad, and with backing of another Islamist regime in Turkey. So across the map in the Middle East, we see these regimes rising up. It starts in Iran, but it does not end in Iran.
How should Christians think and feel about Israel? Mike Huckabee is a former pastor and governor of Arkansas, who is currently the U.S. ambassador to Israel.
Ambassador Huckabee, the United States is friendly with a lot of different countries, but we have a special relationship with Israel. And why is that?
We share a common foundation, and that foundation is a Judeo-Christian understanding and worldview, without which there is no Western civilization. Most of Europe was founded on that same notion, but they've pretty much abandoned and rejected it. And a lot of America has rejected it, but it still holds true that our fundamental foundation is that understanding of who God is.
What you're saying is that we wouldn't be who we are if Israel wasn't what it is.
You can be Jewish and have nothing whatsoever to do with Christians. I, on the other hand, cannot be a Christian without completely embracing everything there is in the Jewish foundation, because without that Jewish foundation, there is no Christianity. So there is an organic connection between every person of faith, be it Christian or Jew, to each other, whether they totally understand that or not.
Jewish groups on campus received anti-Semitic threats yesterday.
Anti-Semitic attack injured several people. 2 people are dead after a shooting outside a Jewish museum in Washington, D.C.
What do you think is anti-Semitism?
The whole issue of anti-Semitism is not geopolitical, it is not ethnicity, it's not socioeconomic. It really is a spiritual disease. It is up versus down, good versus evil, right versus wrong.
For me, one way to identify anti-Semitism is to ask this question. Are you singling out the Jews? People can criticize Israel, people can criticize the Jews, but when you're criticizing the Jews for something that you don't criticize others for, then it raises the question, what's your real motive?
There is no doubt in the world that there is a different standard applied to Israel, but also to Jews as a people. Every time Israel wins the war, and the world responds, Israel needs to give up land for the people that tried to kill Israel. When in all of human history has the nation who won a war been asked to give up what they won after having been attacked? What happened October the 7th was a seminal event, not just for Israel and the Jews. It is a seminal event for the world.
The writer Jonathan Cahn talks about the fact that what happened on October 7th has a lot of parallels of some of the ancient conflicts of Israel.
Centuries ago, when it was the Philistines, it's easier to say, but they were a primitive, uneducated people. We're talking about now people in the 21st century who had access to a much broader body of knowledge, understanding, history, and perspective. This was the intentional slaughter of the most innocent. The children, the babies, women, the elderly people. Why a level of evil like that? Where does this come from? And I really believe this comes from below. This is from hell itself.
And yet, not only in the Islamic world, but in Europe, in Canada, in the United States, you have huge outpourings of activism, not to express indignation over the terrorist attacks, but over Israel's response.
In the time of the judges in the Old Testament, it was said that everyone did what was right in his own eyes. In many ways, that describes our culture today.
The Western countries are pulling away from God. Logically, they're pulling away from the people of God. You have moral inversion in the West. Right becomes wrong and wrong becomes right. They look at the people who attack Israel and they go, the people who attack Israel are the victims and Israel is the aggressor.
It is a totally upside down morality to think that when Jewish people are attacked, it had to be their fault. And when they defend themselves and they seek to preserve the lives of their own people, somehow that's an atrocity.
Palestine could be a thriving metropolis, right? President Trump talks about it as a Riviera.
Gaza could have been Singapore. Hamas turned it into Haiti.
Amen, Tomas.
At one point in the dragon prophecy, it speaks about the war against the woman and her child and her other children.
If the woman is Israel, then who are the rest of her children? They have to be children of Israel. If you're a true Christian, the Bible says you're actually a child of Israel. You are spiritually an Israelite. So the enemy makes war against both Israels. The Israel of flesh and blood in the world to destroy it physically, and the spiritual Israel to destroy it spiritually, to persecute it. And the Bible says that in the last days, both wars are going to be evident. The war against Israel and the war against God's people, against Christians.
Then when you look at who is persecuting the Christians, very often it's coming from the same forces of radical Islam that are going against the Jews.
It's amazing.
It's the same enemy.
Yeah, and at the same time, the very left wing, they're generally against Israel and against the ways of the Bible, against Christians. The same end-time culture that hates Israel is increasingly hating God's people who follow the Messiah. So we're going to watch both wars happen. Israel and Christians are coming together in a way they have never been before since the book of Acts. You had a Western civilization that wasn't Christian, it was pagan and anti-Christian. Well, it's going back. So if everything's going back, then the people of God have to go back to where we were, which is the book of Acts, which is a dynamic, revolutionary, against the grain, against the flow of the culture, people of God who transform the world. That's what we're called to.
Just as the Israelis had to become warriors like the Israelites of old, in the same vein, Christians today need to put on a spiritual armor like the Christians of old in the book of Acts, and have that kind of a warrior spirit.
Yes. We have to become fighters in the spirit for God. We don't accept what the enemy wants to do with our culture. We don't accept what he wants to do with the nation. We don't accept what he wants to do in our family, with our children, in our marriage, in our calling. We say no. We take up the armor. Because the very first believers, they were warriors in the spirit. God wants that again. You overcome, you slay the dragon.
Your message here is become a dragon slayer.
Yes. Messiah is the ultimate dragon slayer, so we have to be that. We are fighters against darkness, and if we keep fighting, we win.
We're holding on, but not for long. Can you pull us all close to the Holy Ghost and keep us strong?
This is the Church of the Ascension, the site where Jesus was taken up into heaven. For me, it's a reminder that there's a world behind the world and concealed within political conflicts is an eternal battle between good and evil. The dragon is not always apparent to us, but he is real and working to achieve our destruction. Yet God's word stands firm. The dragon will not prevail. In the end, he will be cast down and God will triumph.
What was the name of this movie? Dario, what was the name of this movie?
Dragon's Prophecy.
The Dragon's Prophecy. Check it out.
Be bold in Christ, everybody. Bold in Him. God, you will win.